Naomi Long, Alliance Party Leader, thank you very much for speaking to Belfast Live. Firstly, to ask you about the Windsor Framework. So this new deal involves Irish Sea trade barriers being removed, returning VAT powers to the UK over in relation to Northern Ireland, as well as giving Stormont a veto over some EU law. So it seems like there's significant concessions here. So was the DUP's strategy of boycotting Stormont, did that work in the end?
No, I don't think it did. I think the DUP have benefited from the fact that, if you like, coincidence rather than correlation makes it look good. But actually what worked for a change was having a Prime Minister in these negotiations who took the negotiations seriously, who treated the people with whom he was negotiating as equals. And therefore the EU were ready to do serious business. The truth is, this is a deal we could have had in 2019 had we had a Prime Minister who was not more interested in hyping up tensions, in demeaning the EU and in generally creating mayhem. I think what we have now is a Prime Minister who has taken this seriously, has engaged very honestly and openly with the EU, and what we have seen is reciprocation from the EU on that basis, and I think that that's a good thing. But I don't think it's down to whether or not the DUP were in the Assembly. I think the deal that we have today could have been achieved without us having no government, and I think it would have been much better for the people of Northern Ireland if we had political stability as well as political progress today.
But surely if we had followed, for example, the example of Alliance and other parties who had been calling at one stage for the rigorous implementation of the protocol, then none of these concessions which have been agreed in the Windsor Framework would have come about?
Well, that's not actually accurate, because whilst we call for rigorous implementation, the context of that call is crucial. We did it at a time when the government were talking about breaking international law that they had agreed in what they call limited and specific ways, but nevertheless it was illegal. And what it was doing was eroding the trust and confidence between the UK and the EU on which the deal today relies. So when we called for rigorous implementation, it wasn't that we wanted to see businesses here or in GB punished by the protocol. We actually voted against the protocol, both in the Houses of Parliament and also in the EU Parliament, because we didn't believe it was a good deal. But the reason we wanted to properly implement it was to try to build the relationship again between the UK and the EU, one of trust, so that the EU would be willing, for example, to agree to things like trusted trader status, to be willing to look at things like green lanes. But you're not going to agree that with a government that is lying to you and threatening to break the law.
Just in relation to the language around rigorous implementation, now this is thrown back at yourselves quite a lot by unionist critics of the position of Alliance and others. Do you accept now that that language was wrong to use, and really, that sort of language hasn't helped your position in relation to this?
Well, no, because if you actually look at the assessment that's been done, Alliance is one of the most trusted parties on the protocol and on the dealings with the EU. The public understand what we were talking about in that context. Of course, you regret using language that your opponents throw back in your face, and I'm sure there are times they wish there are things they hadn't said, like breaking the law in limited specific ways, that I then put back to them. But the truth of the matter is that what we were trying to do was very clear to anybody who was objectively analysing our position. That was to build trust and confidence and stability with the EU, from which point we could then look at how we could improve the operation of the protocol and actually reduce the amount of a burden that it was placing on businesses.
Now, one of the aspects of the Windsor Framework is the Stormont break. You've had a bit more time to look at it. What do you make of that decision, that mechanism now?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think it is important that people in Northern Ireland have an opportunity to have some say in the laws that actually govern them. So I think there was a democratic deficit that arose as a result of us no longer having MEPs. That is something that I welcome being able to be addressed. But I think that there are risks around the Stormont break. First of all, there is a lack of clarity at the moment in terms of how it would operate. So if you read it carefully, it doesn't say that it will trigger an assembly vote. So you could have a situation, if you read it very literally, where the Stormont petition of concern could be used to simply refer matters straight to the UK government. Now, I think that that would be not just a democratic deficit, I think that would be undemocratic, where you have a minority able to block and veto things that are happening in the Assembly. I think no one in the last 25 years has looked at this place and said, what we need are more vetoes. So I think that would be a mistake.
I wanted to ask about your MLA, Patricia O'Lynn, the North Antrim MLA. She has decided to quit her role to take up a new position at Queen's University Belfast. In her resignation statement, she said that it had been an honour and a privilege to serve in that role and to serve the public. Well, if that's the case, why didn't she continue on?
I am sad that Trish is going. I wish that it were otherwise, but I understand entirely that when a job comes along that is too good to turn down, and the job that you're currently in is one that you can't really fulfil in the fullest sense, that is a really tough decision. And I know that she wrestled with it. I'm sad to see her go. I know she will be a success at what she does in Queen's. I think she will be a success at whatever she turns her hand to. She's a loss to the Alliance Party, but she's a massive gain to the university. You know, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that every time the Assembly collapses, we lose good people. We lose good people. Emma Fearon from Sinn Féin, somebody who was seen as an up-and-coming leader in the party, took our time out of the Assembly and went off to do other things, to travel and to do other things. Stephen Agnew left the Assembly during one of the suspensions. Simon Hamilton, seen as at the time a future leader of the DUP, left the Assembly during a suspension. And numerous other MLAs were open during the last hiatus about applying for other work. It is an incredibly demoralising position to be in, where you come into this place and you are elated at being elected. You have an agenda of things that you want to do. You have your manifesto, you have that ambition and that drive, and you want to make things better. You watch your constituents suffer day in, day out, and they are suffering right now, and life is tough, and yet you feel that you can't deliver on that.
Now, you mentioned a couple of other examples of people who have left their roles as MLAs whenever Stormont has been down. I suppose the difference for Patricia O'Lynn is that she has left her role so soon after being elected, less than a year. So I'm wondering, what would you say to activists, particularly in North Antrim, who may be frustrated that she's throwing in the towel so early?
Well, that's not how the activists in North Antrim see this, because we have met and discussed this with them. Trish did them the courtesy of talking to them first, as you would as a responsible and engaged elected representative, and they understand her reasons, they understand her circumstances, and they understand her frustration. Thankfully, she has also, in her time as a councillor and MLA, built a very strong association in North Antrim, and so they, I think, are ready now to take on the challenge, whoever might replace Trish, of continuing to build the local association, particularly with local government elections around the corner. So that's not the feedback that I'm getting. They don't see, and I don't think anybody who knows Trish sees her as somebody who would throw in the towel. She's not a quitter, but she is somebody who's very driven and very focused and wants to deliver, and she feels at the moment she can do that best in a different role.
So it's not the case that Alliance is running scared of the DUP potentially winning back that seat?
No, it's not the case that we're running scared of the DUP winning back that seat, and I think that will become apparent through time, that is not our ambition for North Antrim. I'm quite confident that that seat, when won by Alliance and when served by Alliance, people of the calibre of Patricia and whoever will follow her will remain in Alliance seat for a long time to come.
Now, it's been 3 months since Alliance launched an internal investigation after a business advised by one of your MLAs, Patrick Brown, sought to charge a graduate hundreds of pounds to campaign for your party during last year's Stormont elections. So what's the outcome been of that investigation?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that that offer was made without the authorisation of the party, and we made that clear at the outset of that investigation. We did the investigation, we looked at the circumstances surrounding it, and it became apparent, first of all, that no one took up that offer. So that's the first thing. The offer was made, but it was never taken up, nor would it have been taken up, because at that point it would have had to come forward for approval at executive, and it would have been picked up at that point. We have reminded all of our elected representatives, and indeed all of our staff, of the importance of having proper approvals in place before any offers are made. And I think it's important that we did that, because there are rules that govern how we organise the party. I take those very seriously, and it's important that people are robust in how they apply them. That advice and guidance has been given to our elected representatives, but there was no wrongdoing found, so there was no further investigation required.
So in relation to this specific case, whenever Belfast Live reported on this, in one email, a director from Polytrip or Volunteer USA had told this student that Patrick Brown the MLA, would be running the programme, and you can arrange your start dates and inductions. So whenever you're referring to advice, you're referring really to the South Down MLA, Patrick Brown, and you're saying that there was no wrongdoing found?
Well, we have issued to all of our MLAs and all of our elected representatives and staff a reminder about the approvals process that you have to go through before you make any offers on behalf of the party, because we have strict internal rules around those issues and they have been reminded of those. With respect to what directors of Polytrip say, I can't answer for Polytrip. It has no relationship to the Alliance Party. Patrick sold Polytrip, but that was his own business, and it's something that really I can't answer for, so you would have to take those issues up with Polytrip itself.
Now, Patrick Brown did sell Polytrip, but it continued to work under a new company called Volunteer USA, and Patrick Brown continued to be a paid consultant for that company, Volunteer USA, whenever it went into liquidation, owing £64,000 and owing money to dozens of young people. So what do you make of your MLA's involvement in this?
Well, I think you would need to take that up, first of all, directly with Polytrip and with Volunteer USA, because neither of those are associated with the Alliance Party, and therefore I can't answer for those. Clearly, I am concerned about students that would be left out of pocket as a result of any company going into liquidation, and I have huge sympathy with those young people who lost money as a result of what happened. Businesses go out of business, sadly, every day, and there are people who will lose money as a result of that. It is particularly painful when it is young people who have invested that money, and so my sympathies are with them, but it is in the hands of a liquidator, and that will have to go through due process, and it's not something that as Alliance we have any involvement with, nor would we sanction any involvement with it.
And just finally, we may be seeing an executive return if the DUP does accept this Windsor Framework. Will Alliance be taking up the Justice Minister position, and what other roles would you be interested in getting?
Well, look, that's not a question that I can answer because it isn't a decision simply for Alliance. Other parties are involved. As you know, the Justice Minister is the only minister that requires the Assembly to vote them into position rather than just their party to nominate them. So that will be a discussion that will be had with all of the parties. Would we be interested in continuing in justice? I think we certainly would be interested. I feel there's a lot of work that we could continue to do. I had 2.5 years in the role. I think I achieved a lot in that time, but I equally have a lot of ambitions of things that we could do, things that I understand better now than 2.5 years ago that I think we could start to change. So we would be interested, but it will depend on what other parties decide, as it will when it comes to any second pick of ministry. But look, you know, I don't believe that there is a department in Stormont that Alliance wouldn't relish the opportunity to get involved in and look at how we could deliver better services. The key for me is that we're here to do a job. This is work. It is about delivering for the people who elected us. I am frustrated, we are all frustrated that we have not been able to do that over, you know, the past year. We now need to get to a point very quickly where we're back here. I don't think there's ever been an excuse for not having a government, but we have now no excuse for not having a government. So we need to get back in here and start to do the heavy lifting to deal with the finances, to deal with our public services, to deal with the cost of living crisis, to deal with the crisis in our health service. And yes, it will require some tough decisions, whichever department people go to. It will not be an easy time to be in government. But that's when real leadership counts, and that's when real leaders need to step forward and actually do the job.